Hi, everyone. My name is Boris Revson, co-host of the Blockchain Brief. I want to give a huge welcome to our Republic Crypto listeners. Every episode, we interview innovators and executives in the blockchain and crypto space. Today, I am super excited to have Paul, the CEO of Nori. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Boris.
So let's jump right into it. You and I spoke a little bit before this interview, and we talked about the fact that a really amazing team came together to make Nori a reality. Can you tell me a little bit of your story and then a few minutes on what Nori does and what it is?
Yeah, so my background is that I've been working in software product development for 6 or 7 years. I've been involved in the blockchain space since 2010. It was when I first learned about Bitcoin and started mining. And about 3 years ago, I had left my job. I was working on some small business that wasn't really going anywhere. And I got interested in trying to work on a much bigger problem. I wanted a real challenge to dig into. And most of all, I wanted to work on something that would attract other smart and talented and interesting people to work on it. And so I settled on climate change, and my background is in engineering. That's what I studied in school. And so I think about problems in terms of how do we solve them, not just make them less bad. And when I look at the landscape of approaches that people are taking towards climate change, I see a lot of very valiant efforts to mitigate the effects. That means reduce how bad climate change is going to be, but not actually make it go away. And climate change seemed like a very straightforward arithmetic problem to me. There are just too many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So I got really interested in how can we figure out how to remove enough greenhouse gases, take all that CO2 that we've emitted and pull it out and then store it somewhere. And is there some way that we can create some sort of value in that process, like real economic value? So I founded a meetup group in Seattle, Washington, where I live, called Carbon Removal Seattle. And it was a way to network with people who were interested in working on this, who had knowledge to share. And through that, I met my first co-founder, Christoph Jospe, who was working as the chief strategist at the Center for Negative Carbon Emissions at Arizona State University. And ASU is actually my alma mater, and so that was a crazy coincidence. So I reached out to him there. That was over 2 years ago. We kind of kept in touch, tried various different community building efforts around carbon removal. And then last year, we decided that since everything in the blockchain space had presented this opportunity that we could really democratize financial capital with ICOs and token sales and so on, that now was the right time to jump in and try to develop a marketplace that makes it easier to pay for removing carbon dioxide. That was in August of 2017, and then we entered the hackathon that was sponsored by Consensus for their blockchain for social impact hackathon. And we won that hackathon in the energy and environment category. And we had to put it together a team of, there were 7 of us for that. And we picked up 2 other people, and 2 dropped out afterwards. And so we were a co-founding team of 7 people. Our CTO built the photos and videos dev teams at Facebook. Our director of carbon economics is a woman who's been involved in the carbon market space since the mid-1990s. She wrote the very first carbon removal contract for soil carbon, which we could get into later. One of our advisors is Dr. Klaus Lackner. He pioneered the concept of direct air capture more than 20 years ago. So we have a very well-rounded technology and carbon removal team put together that collectively has more experience in carbon removal than anyone else in the world.
And so tell me how Nori actually helps completely eliminate this problem specifically.
Yeah, so like I said, it's an arithmetic problem. There's too much CO2 up there already, and we're emitting about 40 billion tons of CO2 every year. It's more, actually, if you include other greenhouse gases and their equivalents. So here's the cool thing. We already have, this is humanity, we already have all of the technology that we need in order to draw down enough CO2 to make climate change as a problem go away. So these are things like you can change agricultural practices. So farmers, if they stop tilling and they use cover crops, they can encourage the growth of microbes in their soil. This replenishes the quality of their topsoil and it pulls CO2 down. It's actually great for them too, because they retain water better and they get better crop yields as well. There are, we tend to think of these in three broad categories. So ecological, like that soil carbon. You could plant trees as well, but trees alone can't solve the problem because they take up a lot of land and we need land for growing food to feed the earth. Then there's the industrial approach. So the biggest thing in this space is called direct air capture. So there are a number of different startups that have working technology that pulls air from the atmosphere. They separate out the CO2 from the other gases. And now you have pure CO2 that you can do something with. You can either sell it to a manufacturer who might embed that in some sort of product that they're building, like tennis shoes or plastics or construction materials, or they can inject it into underground rock formations. And in a very short period of time, that carbon dioxide will actually turn into rock. It'll carbonate. So that's a fantastic storage method. And then there are hybrid approaches that combine the two, where you grow crops and then you burn them and then you capture the emissions, and or you grow crops and then use those to build or manufacture products and that sort of thing. So all those methods already exist, but they're not happening at any really large scale. And we need a collective large effort in order to do this, because the amount of CO2 that we have to draw down is enormous. So what Nori does is we are sitting at the center of all of these different industries and saying, there are lots and lots of companies and organizations and events and individual people out there who want to pay for removing carbon dioxide, who want to pay to do something about climate change, but they don't have the opportunity to do that. And so what Nori is doing is we're making it as simple as possible for people to pay other people to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Got it. Okay, so the reason that people aren't using these techniques ultimately stems from a lack of education or a lack of the financial incentive to do so. Does that make sense?
Yeah, more or less.
Got it. And then you guys will provide sort of a marketplace where people that care about the environment ostensibly want to provide that financial opportunity. Is that the only thing that people care about, or is there a way for them also to make a profit by caring about the environment?
That's the cool thing, is that we're trying to leverage the profit motive to incentivize this. So the way that this works is when a supplier, we call them, removes carbon dioxide, and that gets independently verified by a third-party group. When that happens, we issue them what's called a carbon removal certificate, and each certificate represents 1 metric ton of CO2 removed. They can list that for sale in our marketplace, and then they, the buyers, people who want to pay for reverse climate change, use our Nori token to pay the supplier for that certificate. So the supplier receives the Nori token and the buyer receives the certificate. That Nori token is just a medium of exchange. And the supplier that has it can trade it for any other crypto or for cash, or they can hold on to it or use it in the way that people use tokens. So what that means is that the price of the token in the third-party exchange markets is effectively the market-driven price on carbon dioxide. And that's really, really valuable and important. Economists and policymakers have said for decades that what we need most of all is a price on carbon. And the Nori token is delivering that for the world. So people who buy these tokens, they can buy them to use them to buy carbon removal certificates, or they can buy them as speculative investments, whatever they choose.
And why would the value of this go up? What would cause an appreciation in value? Is it more and more people starting to care about the environment for a number of different factors? Is it people like Leonardo DiCaprio or the government of Sweden getting involved and starting to buy these things up because they want to be a big part of the solution? Is that the story?
Yeah, it's all those things. So when we describe this market in like the early stages of it, it's going to be people who care about this. Like corporations worldwide are already investing lots of money into sustainability initiatives and dealing with their carbon footprint. And they're doing this because they're actually more profitable in the long run by doing so. There have been a number of financial analysis reports over the last 5+ years or so that have shown that companies that do this are more profitable. So they're doing that. But what we're really envisioning for the future of this is, because this is a software approach and because we're making it very, very simple so that it's just there's a queue of certificates available for sale, and then when you want to buy one, you just buy the next one in the queue. We're effectively making an API to reverse climate change. This is a software app that we can plug into all sorts of apps that people use every day. That means that carbon removal activities can happen anywhere, all the time, invisibly and automatically in the background. So imagine that you pull up to the gas station to fill up your car, and in the same transaction as buying the gas, you buy enough carbon removal certificates to negate the emissions from that trip. Or imagine you're taking a rideshare ride, like an Uber or Lyft, and at the end of that ride, then you get prompted, say a sponsor is advertising and they're going to pay for the carbon removal for the ride that you just took. You just watch an ad by them. Or maybe you're playing a mobile game that's like a farm bill type game, and for each in-app purchase you make, the portion of that goes towards purchasing carbon removal because you're doing some environmental restoration in the game. Like, there are lots and lots of different ways that we can plug this thing in and make it super simple for people to pay for this. Because that's really the problem that we're solving, is we're building the infrastructure for reversing climate change. If we don't have the infrastructure, then the problem isn't going to get solved. So this is the first step towards really solving it.
It's interesting because when I look at, how my stocks are doing, and I use Yahoo as an easy dashboard, I saw that recently, I don't know how recently, they added a sustainability tab for every company. And I thought that was interesting because it was next to very important information like their PE ratio. So clearly, companies and their investors and stakeholders that are starting to take this seriously. And that's what I find so fascinating about what you're doing at Nori. You're building the financial pipeline to allow people that care, like, say, myself, to at the very least offset some of what they're doing, and then ultimately potentially go even further than that because you have a scalability solution on the other side.
Right.
Which actually brings me to an interesting point. When I talk to a lot of different blockchain projects or just other types of startups, you seem to sort of have like a two-sided marketplace, right?
Yeah.
On one side, you have the token holders and the token buyers. And then on the other side, you have the suppliers that need to actually start this process of putting the, I forget what you call them, contracts or credits together. So that certificates, that's right.
Yeah.
So that they could sort of have that exchange. So I can easily see you guys being technical enough from your team's background to build the marketplace. I think what you're starting to do initially is also sell some of these Nori tokens, so that side of the marketplace, whether you're following the profit motive or you really care. I understand the marketing there. How do you convince suppliers that you're going to have people paying them to do this?
So we're looking at suppliers who are currently doing things that is actually removing CO2. Like, there are farmers out there who are doing these, we call it regenerative agriculture. There are farmers out there practicing regenerative agriculture, and they're not currently getting paid for the service of storing carbon dioxide in the soil. So we're saying, you're already doing this, let's monetize that for you. We're just providing a new source of revenue and income for you. And farming is a very thin margin industry. So the farmers that we've been talking to who are signing up for our pilot program are very, very, very interested in finding ways to monetize their land in that way. And then the other incentive is for people who are not currently doing things that could be monetized. So we envision the token being the incentive for businesses to invest in research and development, to manufacturing. Like, if you're a company that makes a tennis shoe and you're through the whole life cycle of manufacturing that tennis shoe, you're able to sequester a net negative amount of carbon dioxide in that tennis shoe, then you should get paid for that service of storing carbon dioxide there. So we're offering this new incentive, a new revenue stream for businesses, entrepreneurs, farmers, people to make money by storing carbon dioxide, and in a way that they're not currently making that money.
Got it. Okay, so the big question is, do you absolutely need the blockchain to do this? And I'm curious to hear what facets of the blockchain enable some of the stuff that you wanted to do.
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and my answer is always there's sort of two sides to it, right? Like there's blockchain and cryptocurrency. And on the blockchain side, what we're doing is every single removal activity, every time someone removes carbon dioxide and that gets verified by a third party, all of the data about that gets stored on the blockchain. So when someone comes to buy that certificate, it's completely traceable and auditable, and it prevents issues of double counting, because carbon dioxide is difficult. You can't see it, you can't smell it, so we have to use data in order to track it. So it's an immutable ledger in the most basic form, like the most basic sort of value that blockchains provide in that way. On the cryptocurrency side, and you can't have one without the other, right? Like blockchain without cryptocurrency and crypto without blockchain, they're intimately linked together. On the cryptocurrency side, we're enabling this new financial market. So like I was saying, that the Nori token, the price of that is freely floating based on market demand for the token. And then that token can be traded for the carbon removal certificate. So that enables all sorts of arbitrage opportunities over time. So if you're a business and say you want to be paying for removing 1 million tons of CO2 every year, because that's how much your operational footprint is, you might buy 3 million tokens today, lock in the price that you paid for those, and then use them over the next 3 years. So that sort of price predictability is really valuable to an organization like that. Likewise, for the suppliers, if they think that the value of the token is going to increase, then they could hold on to that token and then cash out at a later date and increase the profit margin that they've made on removing CO2. Or there might be an instance where someone, we call these CRC aggregators, someone like an investor or some financial intermediary might go to a supplier and say, look, we'll pay you just a flat fee for your carbon removal certificates. We're going to go sell these in the market, and we'll take the tokens because we think that we can make money off of these tokens. So the crypto side of it is that we're creating all of this liquidity in this new marketplace that can help stand this up and get it off the ground. And the more liquidity and the more volume there is, the more interest there is in using the system.
And so we've sort of talked about the two different sides of the marketplace. Perhaps there's a third side, partnerships or folks of that nature. Is there anything that you guys have announced in terms of clients or partnerships or suppliers, or is that coming down the road?
That's mostly coming down the road. The only official partnership that we have announced to date is working with another blockchain startup called Regen Network. They're sort of like a base protocol layer that sits underneath this. So they help farmers measure different ecosystem services about what they do. So data from that network could eventually inform the creation of carbon removal certificates. I can't really say much beyond that, but we are talking to lots of potential people. So I would say just look for announcements about partnerships in the future.
Got it. And then a couple final questions. So on a protocol level, are you building your own? Are you forking an existing blockchain? Are you building on top of Ethereum? What's the plan there, short and long term?
We're building on top of Ethereum. Several of us come from a background of just kind of have been working in the Ethereum space for a while. We believe that Ethereum is where all of the developer interest and developer support is. We understand that people often bring up the criticism that, well, what about proof of work and all of the energy usage that goes into Ethereum? Isn't that sort of like negating the effects of what Nori could provide? And yes, that's true right now, but once that transition to proof of stake happens, then that becomes far less of an issue. So yeah, Ethereum is where all of the support is. It's also where a lot of the financial liquidity is. If you look at like the top 100 coins on CoinMarketCap, it's like an absurd number of them. I think over 80% or something are Ethereum-based tokens, and so that interoperability is really valuable to what we're trying to build.
Got it. Very helpful. So tell me, where can people find more information about Nori?
So our website is nori.com. That's Nori.com. We've just put up our white paper publicly for the first time. We're also running a crowdfunding campaign with Republic. So that's republic.co/Nori.
Amazing. Well, I talked to a lot of companies that are clearly doing blockchain startups because they're interested in some sort of really opaque infrastructure play. I like that what you do can actually be described to sort of the regular retail investor, the regular human, and they can get behind it whether they care about blockchains in particular or not. So I think this will be super interesting to the audience. I want to thank you for taking the time, and I look forward to connecting with you in a few weeks after the Republic crypto campaign is complete.
Thanks, Boris. This is fun.
Thanks for